Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to FSU Coach Live. My name's Tim Bankhurst, and today's guest is James Wagenschutz. James, thank you so much for joining me. You have a lot of history working with coaches and with players. So if you wouldn't mind, just give us a bit of a background of where you got to in terms of what you're doing now and how you got there.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I would say that mine has been anything but a linear process.
I think that's normal, isn't it?
It's very normal. It's very normal. And really, it got started when I was in high school. I was coaching young kids, and I just found a real just interest and unique curiosity in how humans interact with each other, and from watching kids play all the time, and myself as a child when I played. And I think that over the years, as I grew back into sport as an adult, I think one of the things that really stuck out to me was watching humans interact with each other and using sport as kind of the classroom, the outdoor classroom. And I was really fortunate in the early 2000s to get connected to a coach who had been coaching for a really long time in the collegiate game. And I think that the mentorship he provided for me at that time really kind of set me on a path toward creating empathy and understanding other people. And it was really kind of my forte into learning how to coach. And I knew that at the time it was something I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure exactly like where I was going with it. And I think that's really kind of the nonlinear path. Whereas once he took me under his wing, then it was dealing with the adversity right away. And I think that's where it even sparked more of a curiosity, is like, how do you work through adversity as a coach? And so that was now almost 17 years ago from doing it full time. And so I spent 10 years in a college game, and I got involved in the youth environment as well as an academy director or a director of coaching, which is facilitating other coaches. And then also building athletic performance program as part of a long-term athlete development model as part of a youth club. And fortunate enough to work in a couple of different MLS academies, and got involved with our youth national teams doing sports science, sports performance. And along the way, just kind of continuing my coaching education and getting my licensing. And about now 10 years ago, I was asked to start working within U.S. soccer coaching licensing within the state of Colorado, and was able to kind of just keep working licensing and being available. I think that was one of the biggest things early on is just being available to teach courses. And from there, it was really just the connection, I believe, to the sport performance or the physical pillar of the game of soccer, that because I have a specialty and a background in it, which I think allowed me to put myself in a position to where I am today, which is teaching for U.S. soccer, teaching the B license, and also being a coach educator developer and helping develop the next generation of coach educators. And so it's been a humbling ride, and one that I'm really grateful for.
One of the questions I know many people coming into coaching have is essentially, how am I going to make a living out of this? Because if we are, many club coaches even don't get well paid. A lot of them do, but many don't. And if you look at high school coaches, yeah, we won't even go down that road and discuss how laughable much of the stipends are for the amount of work that coaches do. You're in a position where you've made this a career. I'm curious, how do you make that work from a job perspective? Because many people going into coaching have this. I mean, you talked about it, linear path of, well, this is what I have to do. I have to go this step, this step, this step. And you haven't, and you found a niche that makes it work for you. And I'm just curious if other people out there are interested in pursuing that kind of path, how do you do that?
I married up.
Good answer.
Yeah, yeah. I got really, really lucky with my wife and her stability and interest in her passion and career. And I think in many ways, not to say I was riding her coattails, but in many ways, it provided me the flexibility to take a coaching job that maybe didn't pay as much. Or when I first started, I combined a couple of different coaching jobs. So I was an assistant college coach and I was a director of coaching at the same time. And so I think that is a path for many coaches out there. And the problem with it, in retrospect, looking back, is burnout and fatigue and
Mm,
management. And so, yeah, I pieced together, and I am a high school coach. Actually, it's one thing I didn't mention, but I am a high school coach. I'm going into my 5th year this fall. And yes, the stipends are quite low. So from a financial standpoint, there are people in this country that are able to position themselves, not only geography wise, but within the clubs that are able to support themselves full time. Or if you're a college coach, maybe at a particular level, there's enough remuneration to make it worthwhile. But I think from a coach education standpoint, it's a difficult path in part because there's a larger societal issue about paying teachers
yeah.
appropriate based upon their experience. So it's kind of like strength coaches are lumped into the idea that, well, there's a strength coach, you don't really know that much or you don't do that much, so therefore we won't pay you that much. And then the problem is that people keep taking those low paying jobs. And it's a cycle that we never can kind of break out of. So from a teacher standpoint, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, there's a kind of a societal guardrails that in many ways people either don't talk about or people keep accepting the same jobs for the same low pay. And we don't break the stigma that needs to be broken. And we're all teachers at the end of the day, and we need to
You,
raise the bar.
yeah, you've made a really important point in there in the sense that you said that people keep taking these low paying jobs, and even in the college ranks, we'll hear of coaches who may be volunteering, or I'm not going to say graduate assistants because they're coming out with a degree as well, but it's almost that rite of passage of you have to be miserable for a certain period of time before you get the carrots that may exist at the end of this tenure. How do we break that cycle?
Well, I'll piggyback on what you just said, which is some degree of adversity or suffering is necessary to truly become more whole and to become more aware of who you are. So that's an important piece of going through a professional journey. I think talking about things openly and being really honest about it and demanding from either governing bodies, higher institutions, or hiring organizations that my skill set or my experience as a coach demands such. So I like to think about it this way. Lawyers have a specialty. They go to school, they pass an exam, and they get a license. And they have rules and regulations within that license that says you have to follow these codes, otherwise you lose your license. We don't have that in coaching.
Mm,
There's no real governing body of coaching that says you have a license that can be revoked, and there's no oversight. And so, who's going to institute that, and when is it going to be instituted? And so that's a huge piece of it, right? So these lawyers, they can charge what, $200, $300, $400 an hour, and they have a specialty and experience. And yet, as a strength coach, we take jobs that pay $15 an hour, yet we have a master's degree, we have schooling, we have a specialty craft, maybe even 10, 15, 20 years of experience. And yet jobs are paying 15 to 20 to maybe $30 an hour. And I think it's incredulous. And unfortunately, it exists because people continue to take the jobs because people want to get into the profession. And as you said, earn the rite of passage. And so we have to raise the bar, and we have to raise standards, and we have to have some sort of governance or oversight that people are truly credentialed and have some sort of governance with it.
yeah, Very interesting topic. I didn't know this conversation would go this way, so I'm very excited. You said there is no real governing body in coaching, but then I turn and say, well, what about something like United Soccer Coaches, USC? Or do they not govern licensing for soccer coaches? Or is this a case of what you mean is that anybody can essentially be a coach for a team, whether they have that license or not?
Yeah, the latter part. So United Soccer Coaches doesn't because they're not credentialed by FIFA. So FIFA, as the governing body of soccer, at least that's the domain I work in, says, okay, there's a mandate that every federation has to have coach education. Okay, then it's up to the federations to then be able to provide coach education. And I know, like right now, if you look at the United States, we're in the CONCACAF region, and there's a CONCACAF convention, which is a regulatory framework to raise standards. So there are many CONCACAF nations that are trying to raise their coaching education standards.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, anybody can be a coach.
Mm-hmm.
So in our country, in the United States, U.S. Soccer is that governing body that provides licensing. At the same time, you can still be a coach without a license. The licensing then shows that you've gone through some sort of formal education, formal training that's provided with oversight by U.S. Soccer. There's standards, there's assessment, formative, summative, and so there's some consistency there. But I think it's really clear and obvious that across our country that you don't have to have a license to coach.
When I started getting involved in United Soccer Coaches, one of the things I looked at was the different levels, obviously of the licensing you can go through, and the cost for going through those licenses for somebody who may be a high school coach is significant. And it's not something where, oh, $50, I can go get this license. We're talking maybe 4 figures plus. Yet we want coaches to be certified. And yet we also have to charge them significant amounts, justifiably. If you're going for a week license in Orlando and you've got to pay for all the instructors to come in and the facility, et cetera, it's not cheap. How do we convince coaches to get education when they look at their stipend and go, well, I make $2,500 a year coaching X, Y, and Z, and it's going to cost me how much to get that license? And I don't really need it. How do we change that? You may not have the answer to this, but how do we change that mindset of, I don't need this, so I'm not going to invest that money in myself and my athletes?
There's quite a few pieces in there that, if it's okay with you, I want to unpack. And the first one is United Soccer Coaches offers diplomas, and because they're not part of the regulatory framework from FIFA, it's a member organization. They offer diplomas, not licensing. Within U.S. Soccer, there's a license that basically expires or will be expiring every 3 years, and you need continuing education units to maintain your license. However, you're also issued a diploma for life. So there's some nuances there in the language regarding the differences between U.S. Soccer and United Soccer Coaches. From a cost perspective, how is education subsidized in a public school environment? Taxpayers, grants, things of that nature. And as a coach that is either starting out and may not have a lot of money, one of the considerations is, what are they motivated by? Are they motivated to earn money? Are they motivated by a job title, a location? What is the intrinsic motivation for a coach to go learn and have a growth mindset? But at the end of the day, we want to democratize education and make it free and accessible for all. However, it's still in a system, generally speaking, where it's pay to play. So even in college, you got to pay tuition to play college soccer, especially in a situation where there may not be readily available scholarships. Even on the women's side, doesn't cover generally a full for every player, just because of the roster sizes. So in other words, education generally has to be subsidized. or it becomes free. And I think we've seen in the last several years, there's been a huge effort to push things online. And then there's limitations with things online, and we're social creatures and we want to interact with each other. So that's why we want to go to Orlando to meet somebody, and we might meet that person that gets us that next job. So one, I think we have to look at the motivation of the individual. Two is that there are demands in certain levels. If I have a goal that I want to work in Major League Soccer, I know that if I want to work in the academy, I probably need a B license as a minimum standard. And so that one of the things that is tough, which is how do we raise standards while providing democratized education? And I don't have an answer for you. I know that one of the ways I would like to think about it is that most things that we do as coaches has been done before. They've been done in different arenas. A soccer coach can learn from a volleyball coach, can learn from a musician, can learn from an artist. And it's the coach's ability to connect different crafts to how they might explore the ability to enhance their local environment with their team. And that may mean, as part of their job negotiation, they ask for and demand that there is some sort of subsidy to pay for their coach education. So that it could be a way to keep somebody on the job for 3 years or 3 semesters. Okay, you want your C license with US Soccer. It costs X amount of dollars. We'll pay for a third of it over 3 seasons. So by the end of your 3rd season, we'll reimburse you for it. So those are things that I would encourage folks to look at negotiating in their jobs. The second piece is how do you take something that at a raise standards at a national level and reduce costs? Yeah, it becomes subsidy, or it becomes a way in which costs are lowered, and then the monies from that go back into the education pathway. So in other words, a state association can lower the cost of entry to take a course, and then the money generated from that goes back into future coaching education courses rather than the profits of the state association. That means they've got to have the intrinsic motivation to truly want to provide it rather than looking at profits.
Good ideas. I really, really like the idea of tying professional development in with longevity in the job, because we know that coaches typically don't stay that long for a variety of reasons, burnout being one of them. And I would argue lack of training being a significant factor in all of those things. The other thing, I mean, we have our master's degree. And by the way, if you have a question for James, throw it in the chat box wherever you're watching, and we'll get it to him. The master's that we offer is 100% online and can be taken anywhere in the world. And sometimes I get, well, you should do our master's. And the response is, well, I'm not going to get the return on investment of the tuition. What do you mean? Well, if I do this master's, I'm not guaranteed a raise, or I'm near retirement and the raise I get won't pay back the master's. This is where I get philosophical and explain that, why are you really doing this master's? Is it to just make money? If so, there are plenty of masters and careers where you could be making a lot of money, or greater money than you probably make as a coach. But every degree that I've done, I was never guaranteed anything when I got out of that. It was the idea that I'm investing in myself and my future. Perhaps one day this will pay off. But either way, I'm gaining knowledge that makes me more skilled, that hopefully somebody notices down the road and says, yeah, we want Tim. He's well trained. He's well qualified. Let's get this guy. Because if I hadn't done those degrees, well, we wouldn't be having this conversation, obviously. So I think there's also that philosophical of why are you doing this? It's an investment. It's not a guarantee. It's not it's an equal exchange of, if I invest this amount in tuition, I'm going to get this amount back. It is, if I invest this, I'm going to be better. And over time, somebody's going to recognize that and increase it. So I'm going to get off my little platform for just a minute. We're going to take a short break. And just a reminder, if you got questions for James, for those of you watching live, throw them in the chat box. We'll get them to him and we'll continue this conversation. The mission of FSU Coach is to prepare and equip the next generation of coaches and sports professionals with best practices and current research to enable them to pursue excellence. We have 2 academic programs, the online graduate certificate, which is 4 classes, and also a 10-class master's in athletic coaching. Our graduate certificate and master's program can be started at any time, either the summer, fall, or spring. All of our classes have the word coach or coaching in them, and they're taught by coaches for coaches.
The types of classes that we offer focus on the athlete as a whole person. We focus on the theory and practice, the research, the helping skills, even some of the mental performance behind, what it goes into being an athlete. I came to FSU Coach because I truly believed in the mission and the purpose of the program.
I think I have my dream job being a head coach at Florida State, but I know there's always more ways that I can help my athletes and better prepare as a coach. So I thought joining this master's program would help me learn different ways to attack my job. If you're interested in going into coaching or joining the FSU Coach program, I would just say don't even think about it and do it.
All right, we're back live with James Wagenschutz. James, one of the questions I had was, you see a lot of coaches in the coach development that you do. You come across a lot of coaches. What do you think coaches are most challenged with in today's experience in sports? What do they struggle with the most?
Knowing themselves.
Okay, you're going to have to explain that.
It ties a little bit into the purpose of why they coach. And in many ways, listening to the ad of FSU, thinking about what one of the coaches said, which is basically they want to help the players. And so whatever they can do to figure out how to enhance their own knowledge to help the players. My question is, what licensing, what diploma, what opportunities exist within the coaching development world for coaches to understand more about themselves? Because the reality is, as we talk about player readiness as a driver for adaptation within the training session. So players show up, they come from all different backgrounds, walks of life, stresses, family, etc. And every day we think that they're ready to go, or they may be ready to go, and put them through training paces. Well, what about the coach? Is the coach ready to train? Is the coach ready? Do they have their training session plan? Do they block off their time? Or are they doing 6 jobs to try and earn that, put the piece together, the professional opportunity like we spoke about? Or are they really sitting down for an hour and creating a deliberate training session? Do they have that time because they plan out their time, because they're truly committed to being a coach who's pursuing excellence? And what I see right now is the challenge is coaches are trying to get somewhere really fast, and they don't take the time to know themselves well enough to know whether or not they're on the right path or not for themselves. And they end up being busy, they being disconnected, they're not deliberate with their coaching, and they're not deliberate with themselves, their emotional health, their mental health, their spiritual health, their physical health, all these pieces of the whole self. And that takes a lot of maturity and wisdom and time to have that self-awareness.
When we talk about coach education, much coach education, I know you're primarily involved in soccer, much coach education isn't focused on that. It is focused on becoming a better goalkeeping coach, right?
Right.
Drills to run when you have 38 8-year-olds running around. It is really focused more on X's and O's. And I know that you and I have both been involved in USC, and there's change where we're seeing change and more focus on things like this. Why do you think coach education in general isn't focusing on these things? Is it, well, I'm not gonna provide suggestions on my opinion. You tell me.
I think it becomes, because we start with the game and the players. I think the focus is on the sport itself and the players in the sport, not necessarily the coach connected to the environment or they themselves. And then the second piece is what kind of consistency or standards could we offer regarding, let's just call it self-awareness. And I don't mean to, belittle the topic or the point. Everyone's got a label for something. My point is that everybody's got this unique identity that they themselves want to find in the world. And therefore, perhaps maybe the standards or consistency about what that means is really hard to implement from a licensing standpoint or from an education standpoint. Because in one room, we could be talking about mental health, but then in the next room, we're talking about physiology. And the reality is they're connected.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's talking about the connection between physiology and mental health.
Mm.
And so there needs to be some baseline knowledge that can be disseminated at any level. And that baseline knowledge isn't starting with the coach or the individual coach. It's starting with the game and the players. That's my observation.
No, an astute one too. Thinking along those lines, we have to find a way to ensure that coach education meets the needs of coaches, as opposed to here's what I think we should include.
Right.
And there's a danger in coach education, and being somebody who does it myself, there's a danger that we can sit in that quote unquote ivory tower and create these great plans for coaches and really not understand the backgrounds and the needs of the coaches that we work with. How do you as a coach educator know as a coach as well, how do you get to know your players? How do you get to know the coaches that you're developing to ensure that you differentiate your coaching or teaching to meet the needs of those individuals?
There's a couple of ways, and I'll use U.S. soccer licensing as a great example. So within the B license in particular, well, as U.S. soccer as a whole, one of the tasks that we see as a coach is to lead oneself. And so as part of that task, it's connected to leadership. So leadership is the overall task. Within leadership, how do you lead oneself? And within the B license, we at least provide an initial framework or a starting point, which is for a coach to be able to talk a little bit about themselves, their goals, their aspirations, and it connects the other tasks of a coach. So there's an opportunity there for a coach to basically, with a blank slate, provide some ideas about who they are to me as their coach educator. Then we get on a one-on-one call, and right now it happens virtually, and we spend an hour getting to know each other. And it's one of the difficulties is there's an initial power difference because I'm the coach educator. I'm going to assess them. I'm U.S. soccer, so we have to create an environment where they feel comfortable, which typically does not happen often because the student coach who's in front of me virtually are they comfortable online? Do they like seeing themselves? Do they like talking about themselves? There's a number of layers to all of this, but the reality is one of the reasons I'm pretty good at what I do is because my Strengths Finder, if you believe in Strengths Finder and Clifton's and all that stuff, is I'm pretty good at individualizing conversations. I'm good at individualizing the connection between who that person is. There's something I feel like I have intuitively inside me that allows me to individualize the process for that coach. And so they have to feel vulnerable enough to share information that helps me turn around and curate the content or curate my feedback for them. So getting to know each other is a big piece of that. Within the licensing, we provide an opportunity to at least start that. With players, it's not too dissimilar. It's a question of, do I provide a template for them to fill out or a survey? Or do I say, here's a blank piece of paper, tell me about yourself? Well, if we're talking about a youth player, they may not have the emotional maturity to write anything. So then it's, okay, well, let's put them in a setting or a context where they feel comfortable sharing. And that will take time. So it is about understanding that first and foremost, these things are connected to time. They're connected to the person's previous experiences. and they're connected to the sense of vulnerability to share, to be able to create a relationship, to then be able to individualize the content for them.
One of the things, I'm originally from England, and one of the things that I did a lot of learning to become a teacher was self-observation, evaluation from peers, evaluation from superiors, and self-observation. And I came to the US, and self-observation is pretty much non-existent for reasons I don't understand. And I work with coaches privately through my business, and one of the things that is very much required is video yourself coaching. Watch yourself. Give you feedback. I watch it as well, and I give you feedback. Let's have a discussion about it. What do you mean you want me to video? When? All the time. You mean before practice? Yes. What about timeouts? Yes. What about halftime? Yes. We need to see how you interact with your athletes, where you stand, your facial expression, all of this. And the first time I did this with a coach, they sent me a highlight reel, like a huddle highlight reel, basically, of these moments. And no, that's not what I want. I don't want your best moments. I want all of it. Why don't we see that in the US? I rarely see it even in coach education programs where it's required, where we observe you and you observe yourself.
It's so powerful, Tim. It's so powerful. And we do in US soccer, in the licensing, we require that you film yourself, you film your training sessions, perhaps even provide a brief video of yourself explaining your thought process. And yeah, we want to see it all. We want to see the good, bad, and ugly and everything in between. So one of the requirements is to film a training session, 75, 90 minutes, and keep it going. And we want to see the breaks. We want to see the little dialogues. We want to see your nonverbal coaching behaviors. So that's a huge piece of the licensing, because everything outside of being in person together is being able, how can we assess if we don't see them? And then it's a massive cost to be able to travel the country as big as ours to be able to go into people's environments. And so there is that limitation, at least right now, until it goes back to how can we solve some of the greater cost issues. Right. So that is a major requirement, and it's powerful. I know I had that for me in 2017. I took a personal development course, and I had to do some presentations, and they were filmed, and then I had to watch those and provide a feedback and reflection on it with peers and people that I didn't really know, but they became peers by the end of the course. And it's super powerful. We've become way more aware of our mannerisms, our pauses, how we operate in between pauses. It says a lot about who we are and if we're okay with who we are and how we become more comfortable in those settings.
Last question, then. I want to be thoughtful of your time. Typically ask guests if you have advice for coaches, things you've learned along the way, things that you think are important for other coaches to be aware of. What would you like to pass on?
I would say a couple items. One is, all you have is time, and you don't have a lot of it. And so become aware of how you manage your time to be efficient with your time. That's connected to your interests. The second thing I would offer is, if possible, develop a relationship with somebody who could be your mentor, so that it becomes a situation where you can have a two-way interaction, a two-way street, mentor-mentee relationship, and never lose it, even if you are, quote unquote, the mentor. Every coach needs a coach.
Great advice. And then for people who maybe not watching live and want to reach out, get in touch, discuss, have questions, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, my email is jwagz13@gmail.com. Tim just posted that in the lower corner. That's the easiest way.
And okay. Well, James, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your insight and expertise on coaching. Really appreciate it. And if you do have questions, I hope you do reach out to him. Of course, just a reminder, we try to do these fairly regularly. We're coming up to the summer where I usually take a break, but we'll have guests again coming up in the fall semester. So, hey, if any of you watching want to be a guest on the show, want to contribute and share your experiences, reach out to me. Also want to remind you as well, coming up on June 15th is our FSU Coach Clinic. It will be in Orlando, Florida. Here's a little, if you're watching, here's a little outline of the speaker list. James, you obviously know Ben Freakley. He'll be there speaking for us, along with a variety of others, county athletic director, high school athletic director. We got the executive director of Florida High School Athletic Association going to be there. Excited to hear him. You'll probably have to endure me as well at some point. And Justin Shipp, who, by the way, was just announced as a head coach of a high school basketball program this week. So congratulations to him. So if you can, Orlando, June 15th, you can catch that on our website as well, get more information. That's a wrap from us. James, again, thank you very much for joining me. Just a reminder, everybody, to stay tuned, subscribe to the YouTube channel or Spotify, wherever you're watching and listening. But thanks so much.
Thanks, Tim.